Hi, everybody. This is Jerry Garrettson, Tabea Law. We're going to go ahead and continue our look at immigration, the history of immigration in the United States. And let me go ahead and read this here first. And God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat." We left off talking about the Chinese Immigration and Exclusion Act, Chinese Exclusion Acts in the 1850s. And I was needing to do a little research on that to see specifically what brought about this act. Remember, our laws are just a reflection of our society, our culture. And as our culture and our society changes and events occur, our laws, new laws are crafted to for the people to according to what they want, according to the direction that our society is going and our culture. Here in the 1850s, what we had is a large influx of Chinese migrants, primarily brought in to work in the gold mines at first, and then as agricultural workers and in factories, especially the garment district, and in the West generally, California, Oregon, Washington. And you still see a large Asian population today. And of course, I was born and raised in the Los Angeles area, and we have a very famous Chinatown in downtown Los Angeles. Been there several times. I love the food. Chinese food is one of my favorite foods. And you haven't had Chinese food unless you've been to downtown LA to Chinatown. And I'm kidding, but delicious food. Anyways, so similar to what we have with Mexico today, a lot of migrants, and what happened is, like today, people argue that the immigrants are coming in and displacing American workers. So the Chinese laborers would come in and the American counterparts couldn't compete because the industry could hire the Chinese laborers for cheaper. Their cost of living back in China was cheaper. And the money that the laborers were making, most of it they were sending back to China. Just like today, a lot of the money is sent back to Mexico to support families there. Cost of living in Mexico is a lot less than here. And thus, Americans expect a certain living wage, whereas migrants can live cheaper and don't expect a higher wage. So the draw is oftentimes it's industry, really, that want wide open borders because they can get cheap labor, but we won't go into that. These Chinese Exclusion Acts started propping up in the 1870s, 1880s, and that led to Supreme Court, an important Supreme Court decision. I'll probably butcher this, but I'll say Chao-Chang-Ping versus United States, and May 13th, 1889. And let me go ahead and read this because this is important. I want to dive deeper into this case, and I'll do a little bit more research and study it out. But this is a fascinating case here. But here's some dicta that came from it. The power of exclusion of foreigners being an incident of sovereignty. That's what we talked about last time, an incident of sovereignty belonging to the government of the United States as a part of those sovereign powers delegated by the Constitution. The right to its exercise at any time when, in the judgment of the government, the interest of the country require it, cannot be granted away or restrained on behalf of anyone. So again, you had our society, our culture, upset by Chinese migrants because they were undercutting American workers, and American workers were losing their jobs, and thus these laws came about. So the laws were created to fight against the immigrants, to exclude specifically Chinese immigrants. And of course, the Supreme Court and our laws reflected what society wanted. And so that's interesting. So, and by the way, there's always two sides of every argument. And oftentimes it's like the guy putting his finger up and seeing which way the wind is blowing, right? And so depending upon which way the wind is blowing, you can craft that argument and make it happen. And so here we had a crackdown on the immigration. And so the Chinese Exclusion Acts, which lasted all the way up until 1943. And by the way, when we think of China today, we think of communist China, but they've not always been communists. In fact, they've been communist since Mao, I guess, the 1950s, right? So 70 years, 75 years, as long as I've been alive, okay? So that's all I've known, but they have a long, large history, and most of it was without communism, right? And so, I mean, we're talking 1950. The Exclusion Acts were in the 1860s, 70s, 80s, right? Long before Marxism or communism. So this was a different society, but still, we weren't looking at China and punishing China because of being a communist country. They weren't at that time. We were looking at them as having immigrants coming over here and displacing workers, basically. So that's what that is, and there's more to it, but that's the essence of it. That's why we have these laws, and that's why you see a lot of anti-Mexico immigration today, or South American. Some of the same arguments, right? That they're coming in, they're displacing American jobs, construction, restaurant, agriculture, right? And then there's a loud argument today versus most Americans won't do those type of jobs, right? And the counter argument is yes, they will, as long as they get paid to do them, a living wage, right? So, anyways, we can talk all day about that. So, we'll get into what I want to do next time. Is I want to go do a deeper dive on the Supreme Court case that was decided in 1889. I think it's fascinating. But we're done for today. Thank you so much. You guys have a good weekend, and we'll see you next time.